Let's talk about electricity. You think you know what it is, don't you? I mean, you use it constantly. Right now, electrons are flowing through the device you're reading this on. Electricity is powering the lights around you, keeping your food cold, charging your devices. It's everywhere. So you must understand it, right? Okay, explain it to me. What happens when you plug something in? Where does the power actually come from? What is electricity at its core? Most people say something vague. It's energy. It's electrons moving. It's current in a wire. But here's what bothers me about those answers. They don't actually explain anything. They just rename the mystery. Sure, electrons are moving, but why? What's pushing them? And why does that pushing create light or heat or motion? The truth is darker than you think. The thing we call electricity is deeply, profoundly weird. And the way we teach it completely hides that weirdness. We make it sound normal, predictable, safe. But once you see what's really happening, once you peek behind the curtain, you realize that we're manipulating something absolutely extraordinary, something that breaks everything you think you know about how the world operates. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an experiment, simple one. Take a piece of plastic wrap, rip off a strip. Now rub it between your hands really fast, like you're trying to warm them up. Now hold it near the back of your hand without touching. Feel that? The hairs on your arm are moving, standing up, reaching toward the plastic. You can actually feel the plastic pulling on you from a distance. Stop and think about that for a second. You rubbed plastic. That's it. No batteries, no wires, no power source, just friction. And now that plastic can reach across empty air and tug on your body. How? In your normal experience of the world, things only push or pull when they're touching. You push a chair, you touch it. You lift a book, you touch it. Forces require contact. Except here's a piece of plastic, not touching you, pulling on your arm hairs through empty space. Most people shrug. Static electricity. We learned about that in middle school. It's not important. Not important? You're looking at the force that holds every atom in your body together, the force that makes chemistry possible, the force that allows your neurons to fire, your muscles to contract, your eyes to see. You're looking at one of the four fundamental forces of the universe, demonstrating its ability to act across distance. And you think it's a parlor trick? This is the problem. We've become so familiar with electricity that we've forgotten how absolutely insane it is. Let's break down what just happened. When you rubbed that plastic, you scraped electrons off your hands and piled them onto the plastic. Just a few trillion extra electrons. And here's the thing that's going to break your brain. Those excess electrons despise each other. They push away from each other with a force so large you literally cannot comprehend it. Let me try anyway. Take two electrons. Place them 1 centimeter apart. The electromagnetic force between them is about 10 to the 42nd power times stronger than the gravitational force between them. 10 to the 42. That's 1 followed by 42 zeros. The electromagnetic force is so incomprehensibly stronger than gravity that gravity might as well not exist. For electrons, gravity is irrelevant, meaningless. Electromagnetic forces are everything. So here's the question. If these forces are that monstrously strong, why isn't everything exploding? Why doesn't matter just tear itself apart? The answer is almost magical. Cancellation. Think about what an atom actually is. At the center you've got protons with positive charge. Around that you've got electrons with negative charge. Positive and negative, plus and minus. And these charges follow one simple rule. Like repels like. Opposites attract. The forces are exactly equal in magnitude. The push of repulsion equals the pull of attraction. So in normal matter, you get an intimate mixture of positive and negative charges, protons and electrons, packed as close together as physics allows. Every positive charge is surrounded by negatives. Every negative is surrounded by positives, and they balance out. The enormous repulsive forces are canceled by equally enormous attractive forces. Everything is neutral. The forces are still there. Those monstrous electromagnetic forces are still acting, but they're balanced so precisely that the net effect is zero. And because the forces are so huge, even the tiniest imbalance creates effects you can feel. When you rub that plastic wrap, you move maybe 1 electron in every trillion. That's essentially nothing, but it's enough to make your arm hairs stand up. Because when the underlying forces are that enormous, even the smallest excess creates a noticeable effect. This changes everything about how you think about matter. Pick up a mug, hold it in your hand. What are you feeling? You think you're feeling the solidity of ceramic, physical substance. Wrong. You're feeling electromagnetic repulsion. The electrons in your hand are pushing away from the electrons in the mug with enormous force. The reason you can't push your hand through the mug is because the electromagnetic forces are so strong that the electrons refuse to overlap. Your hand never touches the mug. Not really. There's always a tiny gap between the atoms in your hand and the atoms in the mug. You're not feeling contact. You're feeling the electromagnetic force pushing back at you. And here's the thing that should completely restructure your worldview. All forces you've ever felt are electromagnetic. Every push, every pull, every sensation of touch or pressure or resistance, it's all electromagnetic repulsion and attraction acting at a distance. You have never touched anything in your entire life. Every time you think you're touching something, you're feeling electrons pushing away from electrons through empty space. The same force you saw with the plastic wrap, just acting at smaller distances where the forces become enormous. Now let's talk about wires. You've got a copper wire stretching across your house. At one end there's an outlet, at the other end there's a lamp. You flip the switch, the lamp lights up instantly. What just happened? The standard explanation is that electricity flows like water. Electrons enter the wire at one end, travel down its length, and emerge at the other end. That explanation is completely wrong. Electrons in a wire move incredibly slowly, about 1 millimeter per second. At that speed, it would take nearly half an hour for an electron to travel across your house. But the lamp turns on instantly. So what's really happening? Here's the key. The wire is already full of electrons. Copper has lots of free electrons just sitting there, ready to move. When you close the switch, you create a voltage difference. That voltage pushes on the electrons at one end of the wire. But because electrons repel each other across distances, that push immediately affects the next electron, which pushes the next one, which pushes the next one. It's like a line of people standing shoulder to shoulder. If you push the person at one end, the person at the other end feels it almost immediately. Not because the first person walked down the line, but because the push was transmitted through the crowd. The push travels through the wire at nearly the speed of light. Not because individual electrons are moving fast, but because the electromagnetic force acts instantaneously across distance. That's what makes electricity useful. You can push here and something responds there, almost instantly, across huge distances. But where does the push come from? Let's trace it back. Your lamp connects to an outlet. The outlet connects to wires in your walls. Those connect to power lines, and those connect to a power plant. Maybe it's miles away, maybe 100 miles away. And at that power plant, something is spinning. A massive turbine weighing tons, rotating at thousands of RPM. And that spinning motion, happening miles away, is what's powering your lamp. How is that possible? The connection between that spinning turbine and your lamp is magnetism. Electricity and magnetism are the same thing. They're not two separate phenomena. They're two aspects of one unified force, the electromagnetic force. Moving electric charges create magnetic fields. Changing magnetic fields create electric currents. They're inseparable. Here's how a generator works. You spin copper wire inside a magnetic field. The magnetic field pushes on the electrons in the copper. The electrons don't want to move, but the field is insistent. You force the electrons to flow. That's electric current. That's it. Motion plus magnets plus copper equals electricity. Now run it backwards. Push electricity through copper wire inside a magnetic field. The field pushes on the moving electrons. The wire moves. That's a motor. Same phenomenon, just reversed. Generators turn motion into electricity. Motors turn electricity into motion. And the reason this works is because electricity and magnetism are unified. They're aspects of the same underlying force. This should seem impossible. You're telling me I can move metal in one place and other metal moves in another place with nothing physically connecting them except thin copper wire? Yes. You're telling me that spinning a magnet near copper generates a push that travels through wires and makes other copper move? Yes. And we use this every second of every day. Every motor, every generator, every power grid on Earth operates on this principle. Water falls on one side of a dam. Turbines spin. Copper moves through magnetic fields. Electrons get pushed. The push travels through hundreds of miles of wire at nearly light speed. It reaches your house, makes electrons move through a motor. Your fan turns on. Water falling in one place makes a motor spin in another place, miles away, connected by nothing but thin metal wire. That's insane. You don't even need permanent magnets for this to work. Take a coil of copper wire, run electricity through it. The moving electrons create a magnetic field. Now move that coil near another coil of copper. The changing magnetic field pushes on electrons in the second coil. Current flows, even though there's no physical connection. That's a transformer. That's how the power grid works. Just copper, just motion. That's all you need. Metal talking to metal across empty space using electromagnetic fields. Now here's the thing that should completely change how you see reality. I said earlier that all the forces you feel are electromagnetic, all the pushing and pulling, all the touching and pressing. But think about what that means. The normal forces, the mechanical forces you experience every day, those aren't fundamental. Those are consequences of the electromagnetic force. The electromagnetic force is the fundamental reality. Everything else is derived from it. When you push on a door, you're creating electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your hand and electrons in the door. When you walk on the floor, you're being held up by electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your feet and electrons in the floor. When light hits your eyes, you're detecting oscillating electromagnetic fields causing electrons in your retina to move. It's all electromagnetic. Chemistry, electromagnetic forces between electrons in different atoms. Heat, atoms vibrating because electromagnetic forces hold them in place. Biology, that's chemistry, which is electromagnetic. Your entire sensory experience of reality is electromagnetic interactions. And here's the deepest thing. You can't explain the electromagnetic force in terms of anything simpler. You can't say it's like a spring or it's like a rope, because springs and ropes are made of electromagnetic forces. The electromagnetic force is fundamental. It's one of the 4 basic forces of nature. You have to accept it as a brute fact about reality. And then everything else gets explained in terms of it. That's uncomfortable, because the electromagnetic force acts at a distance, and that violates your intuitions. You've evolved to understand contact forces, but contact is an illusion. There is no contact. There's only electromagnetic forces acting across tiny distances. To understand electricity, to really understand it, you have to rebuild your intuition from the ground up. You have to accept that the universe is made of fields that permeate all of space, that charged particles push and pull on each other across those fields, that action at a distance is the rule, not the exception. When you flip a light switch, here's the real story. You close a circuit. Electrons throughout the entire circuit start moving slowly, about 1 millimeter per second. At the power plant, a turbine spins. Magnets rotate near copper coils. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons. Those electrons push on the next electrons. The push propagates at nearly light speed through hundreds of miles of wire. The push reaches your house. Electrons flow through the thin filament. The filament resists. It's hard for electrons to squeeze through. That resistance generates heat. The filament gets hot enough to glow white. Electromagnetic waves radiate out. Some of those waves hit your eyes. The oscillating electromagnetic fields cause electrons in your retina to move. Those moving electrons trigger chemical reactions. Signals travel through your neurons to your brain, and you see light. Every step is electromagnetic. The turbine spinning is electromagnetic forces. The signal traveling is electromagnetic repulsion. The resistance is electromagnetic forces. The light is electromagnetic waves. Your vision is electromagnetic. Think about how extraordinary this is. 200 years ago, none of this existed. Then we discovered these forces. We figured out how to manipulate them. We built machines that could generate electricity, transmit it across vast distances, and use it to do useful work. And in doing so, we completely transformed human civilization. Electricity gave us instant communication, telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, all electromagnetic. It gave us artificial light, cities that never sleep. It gave us motors, machines that can do work without human or animal muscle. It gave us computation, billions of tiny switches manipulating electromagnetic forces to process information. Everything, every single aspect of modern life runs on electricity. And it's all based on this one insight, that there's a fundamental force that acts across distances. And if you learn to manipulate that force, you can do things that would seem like magic to anyone from 2 centuries ago. So what is electricity really? Electricity isn't a thing. It's not a substance or a fluid. Electricity is what we call it when we manipulate the electromagnetic force to do useful work. But more fundamentally, electricity is proof that the world is not what it seems. The world seems mechanical, solid objects pushing against each other through direct contact. But that's an illusion. The real world is made of fields and forces acting at a distance, particles pushing and pulling on each other through empty space. When you see plastic attract paper, you're seeing the fundamental force that makes chemistry possible. When you turn on a light, you're commanding electromagnetic fields that permeate all of space. When you understand that, when you really understand what's happening, everything changes. You realize the world is electric, that forces act at a distance, that solid matter is just a carefully balanced dance of repulsion and attraction. And you realize that humans figured this out. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We built a civilization on top of them. That's one of the greatest triumphs of human intelligence. So next time you flip a switch, remember, you're not just turning on a light. You're manipulating fundamental forces. You're making electrons push each other across entire cities. You're converting motion to electromagnetic fields and back to motion. You're wielding power over nature itself. And that's what electricity really is. Not a utility, not a convenience, a window into the fundamental nature of reality, and proof that humans can understand and manipulate that reality. That's the real story of electricity, not comfort, not familiarity, truth,